Bandeham Shri Guru Shiyata Parakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Sya Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagana Raganatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Sabadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Paran Sahagana Lalita Shivashikam Vitam Sya Om Jnana Timaranda Shagyanachana Shalakaya Chakshurun Milidam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Gurva Bhishtam Supurakam Gurganara Sesha Sambhushitam Chintya Chintya Samasta Veda Nipanam Shri Rupa Patanugam Govinda Bidam Ujwalam Varatanum Bhaktyan Vidam Sundaram Bande Vishwagurun Shah Divyad Bhagavat Premnawe Bija Pranam Devam Divyatanum Suchanda Varanam Balarka Chelan Sandrananda Puram Sadeka Varanam Vairagya Vidyamburim Sri Siddhanta Nidhim Subhakti Lasitam Saraswatanam Varam Manditam Shubharam Madeka Sharanam Nyashishvara Shidaram Vanshakopatarubyasya Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanibhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah Namo Mahamaranyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namane Gauratabhishe Namah. So we're hearing from Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita by Srila Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami with translation and commentary by Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. This is Adi-lila, Chapter 5, the glories of Lord Nityananda Balaram. Start with verse number 35. Kama dveshad bayat snehad yata bhakyeshvare manaha avesha tad agam hitva bhavas tad gatim gataha. As through devotion to the Lord one can attain his abode, many have attained that goal by abandoning their sinful activities and absorbing their minds in the Lord through lust, envy, fear, or affection. As through devotion to the Lord one can attain his abode, many have attained that goal by abandoning their sinful activities and absorbing their minds in the Lord through lust, envy, fear, or affection. As the powerful sun by its glowing rays can purify all kinds of impurities, so the all-spiritual personality of Godhead can purify all material qualities in a person he attracts. Even if one is attracted by Godhead in the mode of material lust, such attraction is converted into spiritual love of Godhead by his grace. Similarly, if one is related to the Lord in fear and animosity, he also becomes purified by the spiritual attraction of the Lord. Although God is great and the living entity small, they are spiritual individuals, and therefore as soon as there is a reciprocal exchange by the living entity's free will, at once the great spiritual being attracts the small living entity, thus freeing him from all material bondage. This is a verse from Srimad Bhagavatam. Yad arinam priyanam cha, yad arinam priyanam cha, prapyam ekam ivoditam, tad brahma krishnayor aikyad, kiranarkopama jushoha. Where it has been stated that the Lord's enemies and devotees attain the same destination, this refers to the ultimate oneness of Brahman and Lord Krishna. This may be understood by the analogy of the sun and the sunshine, in which Brahman is like the sunshine and Krishna himself is like the sun. This verse is from the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu of Srila Rupa Goswami, who further discusses this same topic in his Lagu Bhagavatamrita. There he refers to the Vishnu Purana, where Maitreya Muni asked Parashuram, asked Parashara, in regard to Jai and Vijay, how it was that Hiranyakashipu next became Ravana and enjoyed more material happiness than the demigods, but did not attain salvation, although when he became Shishupal, quarreled with Krishna and was killed. He attained salvation and merged into the body of Lord Krishna. Parashara replied that Hiranyakashipu failed to recognize Lord Nrsingadev as Lord Vishnu. He thought that Nrsingadev was some living entity who had acquired such opulence by various pious activities. Being overcome by the mode of passion, he considered Lord Nrsingadev an ordinary living entity, not understanding his form. Nevertheless, because Hiranyakashipu was killed by the hands of Lord Nrsingadev, in his next life he became Ravana and had proprietorship of unlimited opulence. As Ravana with unlimited material enjoyment, he could not accept Lord Rama as the personality of Godhead. Therefore, even though he was killed by Rama, he did not attain Sayuja, or oneness with the body of the Lord. In his Ravana body, he was too much attracted to Rama's wife. In his Ravana body, he was too much attracted to Rama's wife, Janaki, and because of that attraction, he was able to see Lord Rama. But instead of accepting Lord Rama as an incarnation of Vishnu, Ravana thought him an ordinary living being. When killed by the hands of Rama, therefore, he got the privilege of taking birth as Shishupal, who had such immense opulence that he could think himself a competitor to Krishna. Although Shishupal was always envious of Krishna, he frequently uttered the name of Krishna and always thought of the beautiful features of Krishna. Thus, by constantly thinking and chanting of Krishna, even unfavorably, he was cleansed by the contamination. He was cleansed of the contamination of his sinful activities. When Shishupal was killed by the Sudarshana Chakra of Krishna as an enemy, his constant remembrance of Krishna dissolved the reactions of his vices, and he attained salvation by becoming one with the body of the Lord. From this incident, one can understand that even a person who thinks of Krishna as an enemy and is killed by him may be liberated by becoming one with the body of Krishna. What then must be the destination of devotees who always think favorably of Krishna as their master or friend? These devotees must attain a situation better than Brahmaloka, the impersonal bodily effulgence of Krishna. Devotees cannot be situated in the impersonal Brahman effulgence into which impersonalists desire to merge. The devotees are placed in Vaikuntha Loka or Krishna Loka. This discussion between Maitreya Muni and Parashara Muni centered on whether devotees come down into the material world in every millennium like Jai and Vijay, who were cursed by the Kumaras to that effect. In the course of these instructions to Maitreya about Hiranyakashipu, Ravana, and Shishupal, Parashara did not say that these demons were formerly Jai and Vijay. He simply described the transmigration through 3 lives. It is not necessary for the Vaikuntha associates of the Supreme Personality of Godhead to come to take the roles of his enemies in all the millenniums in which he appears. The fall down of Jai and Vijay occurred in a particular millennium. Jai and Vijay do not come down in every millennium to act as demons. To think that some associates of the Lord fall down from Vaikuntha in every millennium to become demons is totally incorrect. The Supreme Personality of Godhead has all the tendencies that may be found in the living entity, where he is the chief living entity. Therefore, it is natural that sometimes Lord Vishnu wants to fight, just as he has the tendencies to create, to enjoy, to be a friend, to accept a mother and father, and so on. He also has the tendency to fight. Sometimes important landlords and kings keep wrestlers with whom they practice mock fighting, and Vishnu makes similar arrangements. The demons who fight with the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the material world are sometimes his associates. When there is a scarcity of demons and the Lord wants to fight, he instigates some of his associates of Vaikuntha to come and play as demons. When it is said that Shishupal merged into the body of Krishna, it should be noted that in that case he was not Jai or Vijay, he was actually a demon. In his Brihad Bhagavatamrita, Srila Sanatana Goswami has explained that the attainment of salvation by merging into the Brahman effulgence of the Lord cannot be accepted as the highest success in life, because demons like Kamsha, who are famous for killing Brahmins and cows, attain that salvation. For devotees, such salvation is abominable. Devotees are actually in a transcendental position, whereas non-devotees are candidates for hellish conditions of life. There is always a difference between the life of a devotee and the life of a demon, and the realizations are as different as heaven and hell. Demons are always accustomed to being malicious towards devotees and to killing Brahmins and cows. For demons, merging into the Brahman effulgence may be very glorious, but for devotees it is hellish. A devotee's aim in life is to attain perfection in loving the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Those who aspire to merge into the Brahman effulgence are as abominable as demons. Devotees who aspire to associate with the Supreme Lord to render him transcendental loving service are far superior. Taiche parabhyome nana chid shakti bilas nirvishesha jyotir bimba bahire prakash. Thus in the spiritual sky there are varieties of pastimes within this spiritual energy. Outside the Vaikuntha planets appears the impersonal reflection of light. Nirvishesha Brahma se Kevala Jyotirmoy Sayujera Adhikari Taha Payam Loy. That impersonal Brahman effulgence consists only of the effulgent rays of the Lord. Those fit for Sayuja liberation merge into that effulgence. Siddhalokastu tamasa parayatra vasantihi siddha brahma sukhe magna daityascha harina hataha. Beyond the region of ignorance, the material cosmic manifestation, lies the realm of Siddhaloka. The Siddhas reside there, absorbed in the bliss of Brahman. Demons killed by the Lord also attain that realm. Tamas means darkness. The material world is dark, and beyond the material world is light. In other words, after passing through the entire material atmosphere, one can come to the luminous spiritual sky, where impersonal effulgence is known as Siddhaloka. Mayavadi philosophers who aspire to merge with the body of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as well as demoniac persons who are killed by Krishna, such as Kamsa and Shishupal, enter that Brahman effulgence. Yogis who attain oneness through meditation according to the Patanjali yoga system also reach Siddhaloka. This is a verse from the Brahmanda Purana. Se paravyome narayanera chari pashe daraka chatur bhyuhera dvitiya prakashe. In that spiritual sky on the four sides of Narayan are the second expansions of the quadruple expansions of Dwarka. Within the spiritual sky is a second manifestation of the quadruple forms of Dwarka from the abode of Krishna. Among these forms, which are all spiritual and immune to the material mode, Sri Baladev is represented as Maha-Sankarshan. The activities in the spiritual sky are manifested by the internal potency in pure spiritual existence. They expand in 6 transcendental opulences, which are all manifestations of Maha-Sankarshan, who is the ultimate reservoir and objective of all living entities. Although belonging to the marginal potency known as Jiva Shakti, the spiritual sparks known as the living entities are subjected to the conditions of material energy. It is because these sparks are related with both the internal and external potencies of the Lord that they are... It is because these sparks, the spiritual sparks of Jivas, are related with both the internal and external potencies of the Lord that they are known as belonging to the marginal potency. In considering the quadruple forms of the absolute personality of Godhead, known as Vasudeva, Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha, the impersonalists, headed by Sripad Shankaracharya, have interpreted the aphorisms of the Vedanta Sutra in a way suitable for the impersonalist school. To provide the intrinsic import of such aphorisms, however, Srila Rupa Goswami, the leader of the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan, has properly replied to the impersonalists in his Laghu Bhagavatamrita, which is a natural commentary on the aphorisms of the Brahma Sutra, or the Vedanta Sutra. The Padma Purana, as quoted by Srila Rupa Goswami in his Laghu Bhagavatamrita, describes that in the spiritual sky there are 4 directions corresponding to east, west, north, and south, in which Vasudeva, Sankarshan, Aniruddha, and Pradyumna are situated. The same forms are also situated in the material sky. The Padma Purana also describes a place in the spiritual sky known as Vedavatipur, where Vasudeva resides. In Vishnu Loka, which is above Satya Loka, Sankarshan resides. Maha-Sankarshan is another name. Which in Vishnu Loka, which is above Satya Loka, Sankarshan resides. Maha-Sankarshan is another name of Sankarshan. Pradyumna lives in Dwarkapur, and Aniruddha lies on the eternal bed of Sesha, generally known as Ananta Sesha, or Ananta Shaya, on the island called Stradadreep in the ocean of milk. Okay. So this next purport is very long. So I'm not commenting so much on these verses because here I'll explain, here's the way I see things. Like, in the past I have read the Chaitanya Charitamrita and I didn't read all the purports. I read sometimes the gist of the purport, or sometimes I wouldn't read the purports. And I feel that these purports are translations of the words of the acharyas who have commented on the Chaitanya Charitamrita and the Srimad Bhagavatam. Especially we have the commentaries of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur and of Bhakti Vinod Thakur. So these commentaries sometimes, as we'll see in the verse commentary, which we'll try to read today, which is about 13 pages long, that there is a lot of explanation. And this explanation I see is like, if somebody is studying, for instance, studying to be a doctor, studying for his doctorate or a higher education degree, then sometimes that person goes into the libraries and does research on what he is studying. So I feel that some of these purports, which Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, he's quoting from the commentaries of the Acharyas, like Bhaktivinoda Thakur and also Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, is like research study that's going on. And I don't know, sometimes it's not really essential to read all those, but they're done to help you understand the matter. But on this reading, I'm trying to read all these commentaries, even if some of them are quite long. And the idea is I'm giving the information which you would get as if you were doing some research on all these verses. And therefore, I don't necessarily feel inclined to comment on all of this, because it's being presented in a way to give illumination of the subject. And I don't really want to interrupt the flow of what Srila Prabhupada has described as his ecstasy in presenting these commentaries. So I'll try to let them speak for themselves. So now we're going on here. This is verse number 41. Vasudeva Sankarshan Pradyumna Adi-lila Dvitiya Chaturvyuha Turiya Vishuddha. Vasudeva Sankarshan Pradyumna and Aniruddha constitute this second quadruple. They are purely transcendental. So there's Vasudeva Sankarshan Pradyumna Aniruddha, first quadruple expansion. Now it's being described as the second expansion from Maha-Sankarshan, of second quadruple expansion of Vasudeva Sankarshan Pradyumna and Aniruddha. So the verse again is, Vasudeva Sankarshan Pradyumna and Aniruddha constitute the second quadruple. They are purely transcendental. Sripad Shankaracharya has misleadingly explained the quadruple form Chaturvyuha in his interpretation of the 42nd aphorism of chapter 2 of the second Khanda of the Vedanta Sutra, Utpatti Asambhavat. In verses 41 through 47 of this chapter of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami answers Sripad Shankaracharya's misleading objections to the personal feature of the Absolute Truth. So we're on this verse 41. So in verses 41 through 47 of this chapter of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami answers Sripad Shankaracharya's misleading objections to the personal feature of the Absolute Truth. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Absolute Truth, is not like a material object that can be known by experimental knowledge or sense perception. In the Narada Pancharatra, this fact has been explained by Narayan himself to Lord Shiva. But Shankaracharya, the incarnation of Shiva, under the order of Narayan, his master, had to mislead the monists who favor ultimate extinction. In the conditioned stage of existence, all living entities have four basic defects, of which one is the cheating propensity. Shankaracharya has carried this cheating propensity to the extreme to mislead the monists. Actually, the explanation of the quadruple forms in the Vedic literature cannot be understood by the speculation of a conditioned soul. The quadruple forms should therefore be accepted just as they are described. The authority of the Vedas is such that even if one does not understand something by his limited perception, he should accept the Vedic injunction and not create interpretations to suit his imperfect understanding. In his Sharirak Bhashya. However, Shankaracharya has increased the misunderstanding of the manas. The quadruple forms have a spiritual existence that can be realized in Vasudeva Sattva, Shuddha Sattva, or unqualified goodness, which accompanies complete absorption in the understanding of Vasudeva. The quadruple forms, who are full in the six opulences of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, are the enjoyers of the internal potency. Thinking the absolute personality of Godhead to be poverty-stricken, or to have no potency, or in other words, to be impotent, is simply rascaldom. This rascaldom is the profession of the conditioned soul, and it increases his bewilderment. One who cannot understand the distinctions between the spiritual world and the material world has no qualification to examine or know the situation of the transcendental quadruple forms. In his commentary on Vedanta Sutra, His Holiness Sripad Shankaracharya has made a futile attempt to nullify the existence of these quadruple forms in the spiritual world. Shankaracharya says that devotees think the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vasudeva, Sri Krishna, to be one, to be free from material qualities, and to have a transcendental body, full of bliss and eternal existence. He is the ultimate goal of the devotees who believe that the Supreme Personality of Godhead expands himself into four other eternal transcendental forms: Vasudeva, Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha. From Vasudeva, who is the primary expansion, come Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha, or in that order. From Vasudeva, who is the primary expansion, come Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha, in that order. Another name of Vasudeva is Paramatma, which another name of Sankarshan is Jiva, the living entity. Another name of Pradyumna is mind, and another name of Aniruddha is Ahankara, false ego. Among these expansions, Vasudeva is considered the origin of the material nature. Therefore, Sankarshan, who says that Shankaracharya says that Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha must be creations of that original cause of the material expansion. Great souls assert that Narayan, who is known as the Paramatma, or Super Soul, is beyond material nature, and this is in accordance with the statements of the Vedic literature. Mayavadis also agree that Narayana can expand himself in various forms. Shankar says that he does not attempt to argue that portion of the devotee's understanding, but he must protest the idea that Sankarshan is produced from Vasudeva, Pradyumna is produced from Sankarshan, and Aniruddha is produced from Pradyumna. For if Sankarshan is understood to represent the living entities created from the body of Vasudeva, the living entities would have to be non-eternal. Shankar, referring to Shankaracharya, Shankar says that he does not attempt to argue that portion of the devotee's understanding. That portion being great souls assert that Narayan, who is known as the Paramatma or Super Soul, is beyond the material nature, and this is in accordance with the statements of the Vedic literatures. Mayavadis also agree that Narayan can expand himself in various forms. Shankaracharya says that he does not attempt to argue that portion of the devotee's understanding, but he must protest the idea that Sankarshan is produced from Vasudeva, Pradyumna is produced from Sankarshan, and Aniruddha is produced from Pradyumna. For if Sankarshan is understood to represent the living entities created from the body of Vasudeva, the living entities would have to be non-eternal. The living entities are supposed to be freed from material contamination by engaging in prolonged temple worship of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, reading Vedic literature, and performing yoga and pious activities to attain the Supreme Lord. But if the living entities had been created from material nature at a certain point, they would be non-eternal and would have no chance to be liberated and associate with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When a cause is nullified, its results are nullified. In the second chapter of the Vedanta Sutras, second Kanda, Acharya Vedavyas has also refuted the conception that the living entity, the living beings were never born. Natma Shrutir Nityatvatscha Tabyaha. Because there is no creation for the living entities, they must be eternal. Shankaracharya says that devotees think that Pradyumna, who is considered to represent the senses, has sprung from Sankarshan, who is considered to represent the living entities. But we cannot actually experience that a person can produce senses. Devotees also say that from Pradyumna has sprung Aniruddha, who is considered to represent the ego. But Shankaracharya says that unless the devotees can show how ego and the means of knowledge can generate from a person, such an explanation of the Vedanta Sutra cannot be accepted, for no other philosophers accept the sutras in that way. Shankaracharya also says that he cannot accept the devotee's idea that Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha are equally as powerful as the Absolute Personality of Godhead, full in the six opulences of knowledge, wealth, strength, beauty. The six opulences. Shankaracharya also says that he cannot accept the devotee's idea that Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha are equally as powerful as the Absolute Personality of Godhead, full in the six opulences of knowledge, wealth, strength, fame, beauty, and renunciation, and free from the flow of generation at a certain point. Even if they are full expansions, the flaw of generation remains. Even if they are full expansions, the flaw of generation remains. Vasudeva, Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha, being distinct individual persons, cannot be one. Therefore, if they are accepted as absolute, full, and equal, there would have to be many personalities of Godhead. But there is no need to accept that there are many personalities of Godhead, because acceptance of one omnipotent God is sufficient for all purposes. The acceptance of more than one God is contradictory to the conclusion that Lord Vasudeva, the Absolute Personality of Godhead, is one without a second. Even if we agree to accept that the quadruple forms of Godhead are all identical, we cannot avoid the incongruous flaw of non-eternity. Useless. Unless we accept that there are some differences among the personalities, there is no meaning to the idea that Sankarshan is an expansion of Vasudeva. Pradyumna is an expansion of Sankarshan, and Aniruddha is an expansion of Pradyumna. There must be a distinction between cause and effect. For example, a pot is distinct from the earth from which it is made. We're talking about clay pots. For example, a pot is distinct from the earth from which it is made, and therefore we can ascertain that the earth is the cause and the pot is the effect. Without such distinctions, there is no meaning to cause and effect. Furthermore, the followers of the Pancharatric principles of do not accept any difference in knowledge and qualities between Vasudeva, Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha. The devotees accept all these expansions to be one. But why should they restrict oneness to those quadruple expansions? Certainly, we should not be so. For all living entities, from Brahma to the insignificant ant, are expansions of Vasudeva, as accepted in all the Shrutis and Amritas. Pardon me. Let me repeat that. I made a mistake here. Certainly we should not do so. What is not do so? The devotees accept all these expansions to be one, but why should they restrict oneness to those quadruple expansions? Certainly we should not do so, for all living entities from Brahma to the insignificant ant are expansions of Vasudeva, as accepted in all the Shrutis and Smritis. Shankaracharya also states that the devotees who follow the Pancharatra state that God's qualities and God himself as the owner of the qualities are the same. Shankaracharya also states that the devotees who follow the Pancharatra state that God's qualities and God himself as the owner of the qualities are the same. But how can the Bhagavad school state that the six opulences, wisdom, wealth, strength, fame, beauty, and renunciation, are identical with Lord Vasudeva? This is not possible. In his Laghu Bhagavatamrita, Srila Rupa Goswami has refuted the charges directed against the devotees by Sripad Shankaracharya regarding their explanations of the quadruple forms Vasudeva, Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha. Rupa Goswami says that these four expansions of Narayan are present in the spiritual sky, where they are famous as Mahavishnu. Among them, Vasudeva is worshipable. Among them, Vasudeva is worshipped within the heart by meditation, because he is the predominating deity of the heart, as explained in Srimad Bhagavatam. Sankarshan, the second expansion, is Vasudeva's personal expansion for pastimes, and since he is the reservoir of all living entities, he is sometimes called Jiva. The beauty of Sankarshan is greater than that of innumerable full moons radiating light beams. He is worshipped as the principle of ego. He has invested Anantadev with all the potencies of sustenance, For the dissolution of the creation, he exhibits himself as a supersoul in Rudra, in Adharma, the personality of irreligion, in Sarpa, snakes, in Antaka, Yamaraj, the Lord of Death, and in the demons. So, to be honest, this reading, this understanding is very useful, but it's also very technical. So I'm going on to the next verse. I mean, this purport goes on for another. Goes on for another 11 pages. So I'm going on to the next verse. So what's being described is all the intricacies and the understanding of difference between Shankaracharya's statements of that basically the forms of Godhead, of Vasudeva, Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha there's incorrect understandings, and these forms are not spiritual. So we'll go on, but I'll just go back to read what the original translation is, because I feel these readings the reading of the purport is very useful to understand what the acharyas are saying about all the intricacies of this matter, and refuting Shankaracharya. But I feel if I read the whole purport, I'll lose the sequence of which is occurring in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. So I'm going on. Vasudeva Sankarshan Pradyumna Aniruddha Dvitiya Chaturvyuha Turiya Vishuddha. Vasudeva Sankarshan Pradyumna and Aniruddha constitute the second quadruple expansion. They are purely transcendental. Taha Jairamera Rup Maha-Sankarshan Chid Shakti Ashraya Tiho Karanera Karan. There in the spiritual sky, the personal feature of Balaram, called Maha-Sankarshan, is the shelter of the spiritual energy. He is the primary cause, the cause of all causes. So what's going on in this fifth chapter of Adi-lila is we're understanding the glories of Lord Nityananda Balaram, and especially Nityananda. He's non-different from Balaram, from these expansions of Vasudeva, Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha, of the second quadruple expansions, of the further expansions as the Purusha avatars of Maha Vishnu, Garbhodakashayi Vishnu, and Kshirodakashayi Vishnu, and also of other forms which are expansions of, for instance, Ananta Sesha, as all the different, the clothes of the Lord, the sitting places of the Lord, the throne of the Lord. All these things are expansions of coming originally from Balaram. And that Balaram and all these expansions are non-different from Nityananda Prabhu. And then you hear, which is also very interesting, that Advaita Acharya, he's the expansion of Maha Vishnu, who is one of the expansions coming from the Purusha avatars are coming from these quadruple avatars. And all of them have this quality of feeling some service relationship, as Balaram himself feels towards Krishna. And in the same way, Advaita Acharya and Nityananda Prabhu, being as expansions of the Lord, they have the quality of offering service to the Lord. So Srila Prabhupada, one of the scriptures actually refer to them as the Supreme Personality of Servitor Godhead. They all feel themselves. So, and Srila Sridhar Maharaj has explained that all this is very important because why? For instance, we were reading this detailed purport. And frankly, if I keep reading it, I'd have to be in a mood to study it. If I keep reading it, it actually makes me tired. Because it's so much detail, and it's hard to absorb all that detail unless one is meticulously studying. And we're trying to do a reading. So, but this is all useful because Srila Sridhar Maharaj has explained this is ontology. Morphology and ontology. Ontology, which all this background information gives, is called ontology. And what does that mean? It means if you understand who all these personalities are, that you can understand Nityananda's expansion of Lord Balaram and the Dvaitacharya Maha Vishnu, then you can understand something of their divinity and their actions, why, in what way they're acting and how they are showing themselves. That's called ontology. If you can, in other words, if you can understand something of the source of these persons, you can understand who they are. So that's called an ontological understanding. So these things and the long purport and everything is very useful. But as I said, it's like research. It's like research scholarship. It's very important, and it'll give you an understanding. If somebody was studying for a doctorate, this information would be very, very useful for them. And then they could understand something, go deeper into what is the understanding of the scriptures and how Shankaracharya is refuted and everything. That would be very, very wonderful. But at the same time, we have to go on. We have to go on with the actual sequence of the Chaitanya Charitamrita. I remember in the past, persons would give a lecture on one verse of the Srimad Bhagavatam, or one verse of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, or like that, or a few verses. But they would just go on and speak, and it was all nice. But at the same time, you could sometimes never come to the end of the chapter, because for 55 days they would be explaining the verses of the chapter, and some days you might not be there, so you would lose the sequence of what was going on. So we're trying to overcome that a little bit by not just reading and giving an explanation, a long explanation of the verses, but we're trying to read the sequence of what is happening in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Okay. So that long purport was in relationship to, I'll read the verse again and then go on to the next verses. Vasudeva, Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha constitute the second quadruple. They are purely transcendental. So a lot is being made of this last statement. They are purely transcendental, because Shankaracharya is basically saying they are not. And that all these explanations are refuting him. Vasudeva, Sankarshan, Pradyumna, Aniruddha, Dvitiya Chaturvyuha, Turiya Vishuddha. Vasudeva, Sankarshan, Pradyumna, Aniruddha constitute the second quadruple. They are purely transcendental. Taha ye ramera rup Maha-Sankarshan, Chit Shakti Ashrayati Ho Karanera Karan. There in the spiritual sky, the personal feature of Balaram, called Maha-Sankarshan, is the shelter of the spiritual energy. He is the primary cause, the cause of all causes. Chit Shakti Vilasek, Shuddha Sattvanam, Shuddha Sattvamoy Jata, Vaikuntharidam. One variety of the pastimes of the spiritual energy is described as pure goodness, Vishuddha Sattva. It comprises all the abodes of Vaikuntha. So, speaking of ontology and understanding things, the first 12 chapters of the Adi-lila basically are doing something of that. They're explaining the original Sanskrit verses of the first chapter, and they're going on to help you understand something of the nature of Mahaprabhu and his associates. And it is in the 13th chapter of the Adi-lila that we start with the Lila of Mahaprabhu's appearance, which we're always reading and singing on the Gaur Purnima day. But the 13th chapter is actually beginning the pastimes, and then they continue, of course, chapters 13, 14, 15, 16, like 17, I believe it is, and the Adi-lila. What is it there? 17 or 18 verse? 18 chapter or so, the Adi-lila, I believe. Let me just check. Adi-lila. No, 17 chapters of the Adi-lila. And then the continuation of Mahaprabhu's pastimes continue in the Madhya-lila and the Antya-lila. And the concentration is actually on the Madhya-lila and Antya-lila because in the Chaitanya Bhagavat, Vrindavan Das Thakur, he's mostly described Mahaprabhu's pastimes in Navadip, and the emphasis is there. And he's presenting principally the understanding of Mahaprabhu as Gaur Narayan. But it's actually Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami who's continuing with those pastimes in more detail. Vrindavan Das Thakur, he is a devotee, a disciple of Nityananda Prabhu, and his concentration is on Nityananda. You could call the Chaitanya Bhagavat, as it's the Chaitanya Bhagavat, you could call it the Nityananda Bhagavat. That's the emphasis. But Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, he's going into deeper development in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. So one variety of the pastimes of the spiritual energy is described as pure goodness, Vishuddha Sattva. It comprises all the abodes of Vaikuntha. Shad Vidaishvarya Taha Sakala Chinmoy Sankarshanar Vibhuti Sab Janiya Nischoy. The 6 attributes are all spiritual. Know for certain that they are all manifestations of the opulence of Sankarshan. Jivanam datastakya ekshakti hoy Maha-Sankarshan sub jivara ashroy. There's one marginal potency known as the jiva. Maha-Sankarshan is the shelter of all jivas. Jahoite Vishwotpati Jahate Praloy Te Purushera Sankarshana Samashroy. Sankarshan is the original shelter of the Purusha, from whom this world is created and in whom it is dissolved. So of those expansions, Sankarshan, who is in the first quadruple expansion known as Maha-Sankarshan, and then comes the second Sankarshan in the second quadruple expansions of Vasudeva, Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha. Sankarshan is the original shelter of the Purusha, meaning the Maha Vishnu, then Garbhodakashayi Vishnu, then Kshirodakashayi Vishnu. Sankarshan is the original shelter of the Purusha, from whom this world is created and in whom it is dissolved. So all this is happening in the chapter entitled The Glories of Lord Nityananda Balaram, because what's being explained is Nityananda Balaram is actually, He is the source of all these expansions. He's non-different from Balaram. He's non-different from Maha-Sankarshan, from the quadruple expansions. They all emanate ultimately from him. Sarvashroy, Sarvadbhuta, Aishvarya Apar, Ananta Kahite Nare, Mahima Jahar. He, Sankarshan, is the shelter of everything. He is wonderful in every respect. His opulences are infinite. Even Ananta cannot describe his glory. Turiya Vishuddha Sattva Sankarshananam Tihojara Amsha Se Nityananda Ram. That Sankarshan, who is transcendental pure goodness, is a partial expansion of Nityananda Balaram, of Nityananda. Ashtama Shloker Koila Sankepe Vivaran Navama Shloker Arta Shuna Dibyaman. I have briefly explained the 8th verse. Now please listen with attention as I explain the 9th verse. So it says here, Krishnadas Kaviraj is saying, I have briefly explained the 8th verse of the original verses of the first chapter, the first 14 verses in Sanskrit. He says, I briefly explained the 8th verse. So the 8th verse of the first 14 verses, which are known as the auspicious invocation of the work. The 8th verse was Mayatite Vyapi Vaikuntaloke Purnaishvarye Sri Chatur Vyuhamadye Rupam Yashodbhati Sankarshanakyam Tam Sri Nityananda Ramam Prapadye. I surrender unto the lotus feet of Sri Nityananda Ram, who is known as Sankarshan, in the midst of the Chatur Vyuha, consisting of Vasudeva, Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha. He possesses full opulences and resides in Vaikuntha Loka, far beyond the material creation. Now he says, I have briefly explained the 8th verse. Now please listen with attention as I explain the 9th verse. And the 9th verse is given here. Maya Bharta Janda Sangashrayanga Sheti Sakshad Karanam Bodhi Madhye Yashai Kamsha Shri Puman Adidevas Tam Sri Nityanandam Ramam Prapadye. I offer my full obeisances unto the feet of Sri Nityananda Ram, whose partial representation, called Karanabdhishayi Vishnu, lying on the Karana ocean, is the original Purusha, the master of the illusory energy and the shelter of all the universes. So now we're going from the quadruple expansion to the understanding of the Purusha avatars, and starting with Maha Vishnu. I offer my full obeisances unto the feet of Sri Nityananda Ram, whose partial representation, called Karanabdhishayi Vishnu, what Karanabdhishayi Vishnu is Maha Vishnu, whose partial representation, called Karanabdhishayi Vishnu, lying on the Karana ocean, is the original Purusha, the master of the illusory energy and the shelter of all the universes. So we'll continue with that tomorrow, and then we'll hear that all the Purushas are all expansions, parts of a part of Sri Nityananda Ram, Sri Nityananda Prabhu. So if one thing you'll understand from hearing this is the divinity of Nityananda Prabhu, who he is. And this is very good, because otherwise if you read the Chaitanya Charitamrita without understanding who Mahaprabhu is, like as we say, Sri Krishna Chaitanya Radha Krishna Nahyanya, that Mahaprabhu is internally Krishna, but he's covered with the heart and halo, or meaning the Bhava Kanti. Bhava means mood or heart, and Kanti means the beauty or the halo, heart and halo. that Sri Krishna Chaitanya Radha Krishna Nahiyanya, that Mahaprabhu is Krishna, internally Krishna, but he's been covered with the feelings and the beauty of Srimati Radharani, specifically her golden color. And then you can understand Nityananda Prabhu is non-different from Balaram and all the expansions of Balaram, which incidentally include Maha Vishnu, who is Advaitacharya, is non-different from him. So that's very interesting, because later we'll see in the Lila, there's always mock fighting and arguments going on between Nityananda and Advaitacharya. They're always often arguing with each other. And this is also different than an understanding of the emphasis of Vrindavan Das Thakur. Vrindavan Das Thakur says that Mahaprabhu is an expansion of Kshirodakashayi Vishnu. And but here we hear Krishnadas Kaviraj saying that Mahaprabhu is the combined form of Radha and Krishna. So why the different understanding? Due to the emphasis of Vrindavan Das Thakur as a devotee of Nityananda Prabhu and of Mahaprabhu, of course, and his understanding has a different focus. But we understand, Srila Guru Maharaj has explained that these things, or in fact, who says it is Krishnadas Kaviraj. He says, if you have $1 million, you also have $1,000, you also have $100, you also have $20, you also have 10. They're all contained within $1 million. So if you have the source of all the incarnations are also there present. When Mahaprabhu is present, being non-different from Krishna, all the expansions of Krishna are also present. So it's not incorrect. It's not incorrect to say that Mahaprabhu is also expansions that are coming, such as Kshirodakashayi Vishnu, and that may be the particular vision of a devotee of the Lord. He may see the Lord he may see Mahaprabhu as being of being Kshirodakashayi Vishnu. He may see Mahaprabhu as I'm trying to remember, my memory is failing me, but like this. So anyway, so now I'll continue. I'll sing Hari Haraya. Some devotee may see Mahaprabhu as like this, as being Kshirodakashayi Vishnu, or he may see Mahaprabhu as Vamana Dev. It depends on the vision of the devotees. But we accept the highest vision of Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami. He's saying Mahaprabhu as being Krishna, but he's covered with the feelings of Srimati Radharani, meaning her separation from Krishna. When Krishna leaves Vrindavan, Radharani is feeling great separation from Krishna, and that separation is what Mahaprabhu is so often showing all the time. And also her beauty, which means her golden color. So Krishna's normally black, but now he's been covered with the golden color of Srimati Radharani. So now we'll finish here tomorrow. we'll continue. And of course, when we start with our Govinda Mela, we'll have to form our own schedule to accommodate all the devotees. But right now I'm still continuing with the sequence that I followed of the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Hari Haraya Nama Krishna. 1 second here. Hari Haraya Nama Krishna Jaravaya Nama. Hari Haraya Nama Krishna Jaravaya Nama. Jaravaya Maravaya Keshavaya Nama. Jaravaya Maravaya Keshavaya Nama. Gopal Govinda Ram Shri Madhusudan. Gopal Govinda Ram Shri Madhusudan. Giridhari Gopinatha Manana Mohan. Giridhari Gopinatha Manana Mohan. Shri Chaitanya Nityananda Shri Advaita Chandra. Shri Chaitanya Nityananda Shri Advaita Chandra. Karanara Shiva Sari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Karanara Shiva Sari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jai Rupa Sanatan Bhakta Raghunan. Jai Rupa Sanatan Bhakta Raghunan. Shri Jiva Gopala Bhakta Rasa Raghunan. Shri Jiva Gopala Bhakta Rasa Raghunan. H.I. Gosai Kori Charana Bandhan. H.I. Gosai Kori Charana Bandhan. Jaoite Vignana Shavishta Puran. Jaoite Vignana Shavishta Puran. H.I. Gosai Jarmui Karadas. Jai Gosai Jarmui Karadas. Tasabar Pada Renu Mora Panchagras. Tasabar Pada Renu Mora Panchagras. Tarer Charana Devi Bhakta Sanibas. Tarer Charana Sevi Bhakta Sanibas. Janame Janame More Ambilas. Me Janame More Ambilas. H.I. Gosai Jabe Braje Koilabas. Jai Gosai Jabe Braje Koilabas. Radha Krishna Nitya Lila Korila Prakash. Radha Krishna Nitya Lila Korila Prakash. Anande Bolo Hari Bhaja Vrindavan. Anande Bolo Hari Bhaja Vrindavan. Shri Guru Vaishnava Pade Majai Aman. Shri Guru Vaishnava Pade Majai Aman. Shri Guru Vaishnava Padma Purana. Guru Vaishnava Padma Purana. Hare Nam Sankirtana Koe Naradamuda. Hare Nam Sankirtana Koe Naradamuda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Nitai Gaura Haribo, 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 Nitai Gaura Haribo, 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 Haribo. Jai Saparikara Shishi Guru Gauranga Gandharvika Giridhara Jo Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parabhajakacharya Statara Sadashi Shimad Srila Bhakti Nirmalacharya Maharaj Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parabhajakacharya Statara Sadashi Shimad Srila Bhakti Sundar Govindadev Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parabhajakacharya Statara Sadashi Shimad Srila Bhakti Rakak Sridhar Dev Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Jai Bhagavan Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Thakur Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Srila Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Srila Satchidananda Bhakti Vinod Thakur Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Vaishnava Sarvabhauma Srila Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai. Rupanuga Guru Bharga Ki Jai. Namachar Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Shri Rupa Sanatana Bhatta Ragana Shri Jiva Gopal Bhatta Dasha Ragana Shad Goswami Prabhu Ki Jai. Premzi Gaur Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Shri Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Vishvavarenya Srila Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Srila Bhakti Kushamashra Maharaj Ki Jai. Srila Bhakti Tilak Neriha Maharaj Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Navadip Dham Ki Jai. Shri Mayapur Ki Jai. Saparshada Shri Nityananda Prabhu Ki Jai. Saparshada Shriman Mahaprabhu Ki Jai. Shri Koladvip Ki Jai. Shri Chaitanya Saraswat Mat Ki Jai. Sokel Shri Chaitanya Saraswat Sevashram Ki Jai. Ganga Devi Ki Jai. Tulasi Maharani Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Go Gopi Govardhan Shyam Kuna Radha Kunda Kalindi Yamuna Juj Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai. All the assembled devotees Ki Jai. Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bol.